What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. This is American Crime Story Season 1, Episode 6, or The People vs. OJ, Episode 6. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. I find it interesting because all the titles thus far have been said at some point during the episode. Like, the Dream Team, they were talking about the Dream Team. 100% not guilty. OJ said, absolutely 100% not guilty. Last week, the race card. One of them brought up they're playing the race card. I honestly was waiting for somebody to go, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. But they never did. And I think mainly because this episode did such a good job in just showing that happening. That there's no way you could not watch this and just go, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. I mean, it's crazy how well they're showing her predicament. They open up with her in a divorce hearing where her husband is apparently trying to get more money from her, later on trying to get full custody of the kids. This episode in particular was all about her. They did have a few other things going on, obviously with Mark Furman and all that stuff, but this episode was about her and kind of showing what she had to go through. And it's very, very well done because I felt for her by the end of the episode. Leading up into this one, Marcia has not exactly been somebody that I'm just like, oh, I feel so sorry for her, oh, I feel so bad for her. Because honestly, it seems like she's creating her own problems. She's not listening to Chris Darden. She's not catching that Cochran is, she's playing right into his hands. She's letting it get too personal. So I really haven't felt bad for her. I'm just like, you're making your own issues. You're causing your own problems. You're leading to your own downfall, pretty much. But this episode really, really made me feel bad for her because, just like she says at the end, she's not a public person. She doesn't know how to do this. And it shows. It completely shows. I'm trying to make sure I get all of the things. Hang on, really. I hate that there's a glare there. I'm sorry about that. So you've got, she's going through her divorce hearing. That makes her late on one of the days of court. And then, forget what happened that day. I believe that was the day that they were questioning the police officer who was looking at the crime. No! Oh yeah, completely forgot. Okay, she got there late, and then they're questioning Nicole's sister, and Darden's doing the questioning, and she's talking about the story about OJ grabbing her crotch, saying, "This is where babies are made from, and it's mine." And talking about he wasn't angry; it's just who he is. It's so, once again, done so well in showing that the prosecution hears one thing, the defense hears something completely different. Because Shapiro's over there, he raises an objection, gets overruled. OJ's like, what is going on? Why? And Shapiro's like, we can stop this if you want me to. Cochran's like, she's crying on cue. The jury's not buying a lick of this. And it's just like, wow. He's very confident. And then Darden gets done, recess is called. Marcia's like, that was really strong. And then as Darden's walking out, he's like, it's Friday, Johnny. Jury's going to be sitting with that all weekend. And Johnny's like, I sure hope so. I really, really hope so. And it's just playing mind games with him. It's ridiculous how good he is at doing that. But it really does kind of beg the question, who's right? Who is the jury hearing her story and actually believing it? Or are they just not buying it because she's crying on cue or whatever? Whatever reason. So it does kind of raise a question, why are they hearing two completely different stories? Why are they just, one of them hears a story and they're just like, this is good, this is going to help us convict. And then the defense hears it and they're just like, this is good, we can use this against the prosecution. How can you guys hear the same story and get two completely different meanings? But I do think it kind of speaks to how this case was and how confident Johnny was that he could turn it all around and change the trial for the better in their case. So, like I said, more on Marcia. She's dealing with her ex-husband Gordon. Uh, Later on, tries to get full custody of the kids. She asks for after Johnny calls for the maid that saw the Bronco at a different time than the prosecution's claiming. He calls for her early, right as they're trying to call Mark Furman to the stand. So she's not ready for it. So they're like, okay, let us prepare. The judge is like, okay, this court's gonna go late. She's like, I can't go late. I need to get home to my kids. To which she does not get home to her kids, and she ends up using that night to prep for tomorrow, which ends up going really well. And then Gordon gets on the in front of the media and is like, she said she needed to leave because of the kids. She did not. I was with the kids last night. I'm tired. She's a fraud. I'm tired of her using our kids as pawns. It's kind of like that's not good at all. That if the jury hears that, which I don't know how much they're allowed to listen to the media, but if they hear that, that can really hurt her case. The fact that now it seems like she used her kids as an excuse, especially after what she said, because Johnny made a comment about her child care or something. She stood up and made a really good point about what he said is offensive to me and to mothers who have to go through what I'm going through, and he doesn't understand. Very good point. But then the fact that you didn't even go home to take care of your kids kind of undercuts all of that. And, all these women who are like, yeah, go Marcia, are now just like, I hate you, you lying piece of crap. So that's not good for her case at all. And then later on, there's even more. Another husband before Gordon apparently gave nude photos of her, like, on the beach to some magazine, and they published it. And that's kind of the last thing for Marcia in this episode. Oh yeah, I forgot the hair. Yeah, I knew this was coming because my mom she lived all of this, and she's just like, I just remember how bad her hair was. And honestly, it didn't look that bad before, but the hair in this episode is what she was talking about. Apparently all these media people were talking about it, about how bad her style was, blah, blah, blah. Her own boss says everything they're saying about you on the media is disgusting, and whatever his wife's name and I, we just can't believe they would even say something about that. It's completely out of line. But if you want to maybe think about, I know friends who, yeah, I'm just like, wait, so I hate what they're saying about you on media. That is just disgusting. But they're kind of telling the truth. You need to fix yourself. That's exactly what he said. It's like, you're a jerk. And so that's why she ends up getting her hair, and everybody just is looking at her like, oh my gosh, that's awful. And I'm going to talk about Chris Darden in a second because I'm getting to a point with him. But it ends with the nude photos getting leaked, and then she comes back into the courtroom after the recess is over, and she's just crying in court. And the judge is like, we're going to recess until tomorrow. I'm just like, okay, so he's not heartless. He sees that this is not good for her, and she wouldn't be able to continue on today. So it ends with her in her office crying, and then Darden comes in. And this is the thing that I want to talk about with Darden. Because throughout most of this episode, all this stuff is going on, and all I can think to myself, and even my mom's watching, she's not back there now, she was, but she's watching, and she's like, echoing what I'm thinking, how did she survive this? How was she able to make it through this and survive? Chris Darden. The man, if it were not for him, if she had had to go through this alone with no friends to really encourage her, I'm not trying to be morbid, I'm not trying to make a joke out of it, I believe she probably would have killed herself, because the amount of pressure she was under and all of the stuff she was going through between the divorce hearings, her ex-husband being a jerk about trying to get sole custody of the kids, her other ex-husband posting these photos of her into a magazine. Just all of it. There's no way she could have survived on her own. She would not have been able to do it. Chris Darden being there, though, is easily the best thing that happened. If she had not brought him onto the team, she would have done so much worse. And not just in the case, I'm talking about in her life. She would have been so much worse off. Because that one night they're in the office alone, and they're reading over it, and he turns on the music and starts dancing, and just kind of lightens the mood for her. And then another song comes on that she's like, oh, I like this one. And he pulls her up and starts dancing with her. And it really did lighten her mood. Her haircut, after she realizes that everybody doesn't like it and everybody's making fun of her for it, Darden writes on a piece of paper, it's fantastic. I love it. And she kind of has a little smile about it. When she's crying about the nude photos in her office, Darden comes in, sits next to her, and lets her cry on his shoulder. Says, if it means anything to you, they look great. And she has a little laugh about it. The man saved her life. And some of this may be exaggerated, some of it, I don't know, possibly, maybe, I don't know. But if stuff like this, similar to this, happened for real, he is truly a lifesaver. Because he's there for her. And even if, obviously they don't win the case, but even if things were to go wrong in the case the next day, he would still be there for her, he would still be there. And it's kind of, the really nice thing about it is that she doesn't really deserve it. Like, you think about what happened in the last episode, he is adamant that doing Mark Furman, having him as a witness, is not a good idea. And she's just like brushing him off, like, yeah, whatever. And I talked about how most of the last episode kind of made it look like, yeah, you were just hired for the color of your skin, which is what Johnny was talking about. And, Darden didn't want to believe it, but the more that she kind of brushed off his opinion, it looked like it started to sit in his mind, that idea of, well, maybe they did just hire me for the color of my skin. But this episode, it seems like he's not thinking about any of that. He's not thinking about, what if they did hire me for the color of my skin? He's not thinking about, what if Johnny Cochran's right? What if I shouldn't be doing this? All he can think about is just trying to help Marcia through this. He's a great guy. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, that's just how it is. There are a few good guys out there in the world. For the women watching, I try to be one of them, but, there are a lot of guys out there who are only in it for themselves. There are some who are decent, but still have those moments where they act like idiots. Chris Darden seems like he's one of the good ones. He's one of the ones that will really be there for you whenever the chips are down. Even when things look at the most hopeless, he will still be there to pick you up. And that's really, really nice to see, and they really captured that in this episode. So that's all for Marcia. That was the main point of this episode. But there's other stuff going on too that has a lot of bearing on the case and on some of the other people. The three detectives that were involved, obviously Furman was one, but they have the other two detectives. First one steps up on the stand, and the main question was, is it usual for three cops to go running from a crime scene to another place to notify a family member? And you can kind of get where they're going with that, like, is this really a normal thing, or is this because it was OJ, because he's a black man? Is that why you went? They're trying to question their technique. They're trying to question their not routine. I forget the word. I wish I was a thesaurus at times. It's not routine. It's, I can't remember. Crap. Okay. Anyway, the system of how they do their crime scene investigation, all of that stuff, like making sure they're following the rules of it. So they're trying to bring that into question. They kind of do with this first detective. It's not exactly anything concrete for the defense, but you can tell that they feel like maybe they poked a little hole in the credibility of the detectives. But then the second one, It shows Johnny Cochran and his two associates kind of having a laugh with him, and then he finds out where this detective lives, and it's just like as soon as he says that, as soon as he says where he lives, Johnny Cochran just like really puts down his drink and walks away, and you can just see it on the detective's face. He's like, "Oh crap, I just screwed this over," because it turns out he took the shoes that were found. I can't remember what shoes they were. I want to say they were OJ's shoes. Like they took his shoes off of him whenever he came back or something. Anyway, but he took those shoes and that were supposed to be evidence, put them in the trunk of his car, and went home that night, and then didn't turn them into evidence until the next day. And where he lives is the same neighborhood where one of the, I think his name was Rodney King. Johnny Cochran was talking about in an earlier episode. One of the beatings of a black man took place. And so now this calls into question the credibility of this witness. You know, he lives in this neighborhood and he took these shoes home. It's also sketchy now. Now he's really, that was a big hole poked in the credibility of that witness. And then the final one is Mark Furman. But first, talk about the maid, the witness, because Johnny Cochran clearly, it seemed like he wanted to get her in quickly to not give the prosecution any time to rebut what she was saying. But because of Marcia's, she was going to go home to her kids, but then she didn't. Because of that, she did have another night to prep for this witness and found out a lot of interesting stuff, like the fact that she said she was going to leave on an airplane, but then there were no reservations made for her. She's like, I was going to, and it's just like, oh, were you? Because it says there wasn't a reservation for today either. She's like, well, I was going to make a reservation later. And then calling into question, at first you said you saw the Bronco at 10, then you saw it at 10:15. Which is it? And she's like, I don't know. And then Marcia kind of keeps questioning her. She's like, it's whatever time Mr. Johnny told me it was. That was, as soon as she says that, you can just see the look on Marcia's face. She's like, gotcha. Because at that point, she just becomes uncredible. Yeah, uncredible as a witness, I think. She's not credible as a witness anymore because, clearly the defense has had some tampering in her mind a bit. And the fact that she doesn't remember what time she saw the Bronco kind of calls into question, what does she remember? Is she remembering anything clearly? So that kind of knocks her off as a witness. And it's the first time that you really see Marcia get a win in this case so far. Like, the whole time it feels like she thinks she's got a good case and she thinks that she's doing everything right, but every time you see Johnny's face, he's just like, I got this. This is the first time he's just like, crap, like, this was not good at all. And even, like, the next day, whenever they're visiting OJ in prison, he's very upset about that. He's like, what I saw out there, that was completely avoidable, and all that stuff. And you can tell that Johnny's not really saying anything because I think he's plotting his next move. I think he's thinking, okay, we need to bounce back from this. What can we do next? Well, OJ's like flying off the hook at all of them. So it kind of does speak to Johnny's skills as almost a chess player. Like if you think about the courtroom as a chessboard and all these pieces moving around, he really is good at playing this game of chess with the courtroom itself. He knows what moves to make. He knows what moves are bad moves. But sometimes, if you make a bad move, it can lead to another good move that you weren't expecting. So I think he's still, even though that one was a minor loss in the overall war, I think he's still just like, okay, it was a minor setback. We're going to come back from this. And he's not really saying anything because I think he's plotting what to do next. And then Mark Furman takes the stand. What they did with this scene was kind of like, it was almost symbolic in a way, because Marcia's questioning him and he's saying all the right answers. He's got all of these right answers. He's talking about he did everything right as far as what to do, as far as the routine. He's doing all of it right. And then they cut to I can't remember where they cut before they cut to the cafe. But they cut to like this bar or cafe type thing, and Johnny and his associates and then Lee Bailey are all sitting there drinking, and he like takes a shot glass and puts it on top of two. It makes like a little triangle. And he's like, "You see that? You know what that is?" And then they make a joke. "Oh, it's lunch." Ha ha ha. He's like, "That's Mark Furman's grave or tombstone or whatever." He's like, I've already got it planned out." And he talks about it very simply. He's just like, "I'm gonna ask him if he ever said the N word. I'm not gonna say it because personally I just don't like using that word." And so he says very plainly, "I'm just gonna ask him if he's ever used it." And it was almost a bit comical because one of Cochran's associates is just like, "What? Like, did you just really say that to us, you idiot?" But he spells it out very clearly. He says if he says he never used it, he'll be considered a liar. Nobody's going to believe him. But if he says he does, he's going to be chasing kids around a shopping mall or something like that. Pretty much his career would be done. And so it kind of did feel like either way, it's over, for him. Either way, he's done as a witness. And of course, I doubt Marcia would see it that way. I feel like she'd be like, "So what? It's not like people are actually going to think he's lying just because he says that." But the truth is, many of them are going to kind of be thinking, if he was able to say that he's never used that word, how can I believe anything else he says? It does make a lot of sense. But then they cut back to the courtroom, and Marcia's going through more of the questioning him. And at first I was just like, wait, did they take a break or something? Like, what happened? And then I realized they're showing her questioning him, and it's like, it's going really well. And then they show that scene to kind of say all of this is completely pointless. This conversation obviously happened before this questioning. So then they cut back to the present, and it's just like, the rest of the questioning is just like, none of this even matters because he's going to get up there and completely call into question the credibility of your witness, and none of the stuff you just said matters a lick. It was kind of depressing thoughts, the way they handled it, because, like I said, you're going through this, you're just like, yeah, this is good, and then they cut to that scene, you're just like, oh, no, it wasn't good, it doesn't even matter. And then they cut back and it's like, why am I still watching this interrogation? It doesn't matter. He's going to get up and completely ruin it. And sure enough, he gets up, first says something about, is it not possible that you took the glove from one scene and moved it to the other scene and blah. Brings up all these possibilities for how he could have tampered with the crime scene. And then he, after Marcia gets up and kind of cuts him off and says, you don't even have the right gloves and stuff like that. And then just gets up and asks, have you ever said the word? And he's just like, no. Have you ever described anyone using that word? He's like, no, I have not. And just as soon as it happens, you're just like, that's it. Me personally, I would say it wouldn't matter to me, but to this jury, you can just see the look on their faces. They're just like, yeah, okay. And there goes the credibility of the witness. Everything that Marcia built up into that point just did not matter. And kind of fits with the episode. Marcia. Darden tried to warn her. She didn't have to bring Mark Furman up on the stand. She could have just brought up the evidence. She could have talked about how it was handled well. Everything was done right. Shown it all instead of having Mark Furman up there on the stand saying, yes, I did all this correctly. Sure, the defense may have found a way to still call into question his credibility, but it would have been a lot harder for them to do than you've already got him up there as a witness. Now all they have to do is just stand up and question him about this, and it's done. So, yeah, it was kind of depressing to go through that scene. And honestly, my gut was just like churning the whole time, like, oh, I can't watch this. This is awful. Because honestly, I mean, this kind of how I feel overall, knowing the results of this. It's fun to get enlightened on kind of how the case went, but at the same time, it's still kind of gut churning to think this is just going so wrong for the prosecution right now. Everything feels like it's going against them, aside from the maid, which was one minor setback. Everything goes against the prosecution. It's awful to watch, and they do that very well. They do a very good job of setting up the kind of the prosecution has this feeling of, yeah, we've got this, we have this, and we're going to use it. And you're just kind of like, yeah, yeah, I like that. And then you flip over to Johnny Cochran, he's just like, now, let me tell you what we're going to do here. It's just like, he's not affected at all by this. Everything they just said, immaterial. He's going to turn it around against him. And I honestly was waiting for him to step up and say something after Marcia called him out when he made a comment about her child care. I was waiting for him to just turn around and say something and completely shut her down and make her look like a whining something. I was just waiting for it. He never did, though, which was interesting. But yeah, it was. I feel like that was brought down anyway because Gordon stepped up and said, "No, she was lying about that." So the last interesting thing I want to talk about in this episode is Johnny Cochran and I guess his ex-wife. I thought that the woman he was with she seemed like his wife. I wonder if it's like his new wife or new girlfriend, something like that. But he gets a call from his ex-wife, and apparently there was some domestic violence between them, which is interesting when you think about what that could mean. Him being the defense attorney, and having his own issues with domestic violence, defending a client who also has issues with domestic violence, you could say that there's a bit of a bias and a bit of tampering going on there. But the ex-wife calls, and he says, the LA Times wants to do a story, which means you're probably going to be getting a call soon. She's just like, yeah, they already called me, and I told them I would call them back after a very long, thoughtful, recollection or whatever. And he's just like, that apartment, I'm about to sell it, and I'm going to get a lot of profit off of that. A lot of profit. And I'm just like, are you serious? Are you freaking kidding me? Did this happen? Did this really happen? Hang on. It's inconclusive. If that really happened, that is dirty. Like, I did kind of look up a little bit to see if it feels like every week I'm looking up, did such and such really happen? There's nothing conclusive. Some say it's exaggerated, some say it's not. It's hard to know exactly what the truth is. But if he really did bribe her to keep her from talking about the domestic abuse, that is low. That is really, really low, even for somebody like Cochran, who is just completely, just not really bribing the jury, but he's practically like conning the jury in the way he talks and what he brings up, the story that he's creating, the way he talks about it. It's very clear that he's just like, we need to create a story that sounds better than what the prosecution is telling. It's called perjury. Last time I checked, that's perjury. Creating a story that is not the truth. So, when I saw that scene, I was just like, oh my gosh. I cannot believe he's actually bribing her to keep her quiet. Like, that is the low of the low. Wow. So yeah, that was a very intense, not really intense, but kind of a whoa moment. Like, did that really happen? Maybe. But still, either way, it's kind of like, holy crap. And then there was one other scene I guess I'll mention, because it kind of does, once again, talking to my mom about this, who lived through it, it kind of does really capture the essence of what was going on at the time when they're doing all of the media stuff. They've got the people talking about, well, we could be showing this show, or we could be showing the trial. And they're just like, yeah, let's show the trial, because I'd rather watch OJ than some doctor falling in love with some woman or something like that. And my mom's just like, yeah, that's about how it was. It was very media hungry. And by all cases, they're showing that very well here. And it just makes it even tougher when you think about how much media coverage this had. One, you've got a prosecutor who is not used to the media, and she is suffering because of it. Two, you've got the fact that so many people know about it. It's kind of hard for the jury to stay unbiased because of how out there this story was. And three, this can lead to bias from the judge, too. And when you think about all the stuff that's being talked about, generally people see that and it can sway their opinion one way or another. Whether it's seeing stuff about, seeing Marcia's leaked photo to the magazine, seeing the articles about her hair, seeing an article about Darden and Cochran, something like that. It can really affect your opinion. And even, the one scene I forgot to talk about. Marcia goes to the store for something. I can't remember when it was, why she was going there, but she has some, I think they were tampons. I think. I'm not exactly well versed in that. Some people are going to make a joke about that. I don't care. Anyway, but she's getting some, and the cashier is just like, oh, really? The defense better watch out this week, huh? And it's just like, really? Did you just say that? Like, that is so insensitive and wrong. Are you kidding me? But the look on her face just says it all. She's just like, I'm so sick of this. So, yeah, once again, though, it really does a good job of showing kind of where things start to really go wrong for the prosecution, where they had such an open and shut case, but between Darden kind of letting Johnny Cochran get in his head, Marcia trying to juggle all of this stuff, all of this stuff at one time, and still trying to run this case, and the prosecutor from last week, the stress of it causing him to, pass out and have not a heart attack, but something similar to it. It really does show what happened to the prosecution, where it went wrong for them. It's doing a very good job of showing that in particular. And I think that's why people are going to watch this show. Because a lot of the people that are watching it, I feel like have not seen much about it or didn't live through it. Because one thing that I keep hearing from a couple people that I talk to about watching it, mainly my dad and my stepdad, but both of them said exactly what I think a lot of the people who have already lived through this. I experienced it enough whenever I was living through it. I don't want to see it all again. I think that's the case for a lot of the older people. So I think a majority of the people that are watching it now are people that don't know about the case or have heard about it. They know who O.J. Simpson is. They know what happened with his case and how he got off even though it seemed like he was completely guilty. And they want to watch to see what happened. Why did it go wrong? Can the courts be trusted? Can we rely on our judicial system to dish out justice? Watch and see. Watch and see what went wrong. Why did everything go bad? I think that's kind of what the whole point of the show is kind of to show, for people who didn't live through it, it's doing a very good job of showing everything that happened and kind of where things went wrong for the prosecution. I don't think that's the whole point of the show, but I think this episode in particular does a very good job of showing how things are starting to fall apart for Marcia and her and the prosecution in general. So, it's a very good episode. Really had me tearing up at the end, though, for Marcia's sake, just because of all the stuff she's going through. Can't imagine. As a 22-year-old guy who is nowhere near to having his own family, nowhere near having to, pay for a lot of stuff, a lot of bills and stuff like that. Can't imagine. It seems rough. And all of that on top of having to juggle the most intense case, the biggest case, and most media hungry case, while people are constantly in your ear about you don't look good, your hair's not right, all that stuff. And on top of that, being a woman who actually cares about that. I can't imagine going through that. And at the end, when she's just crying in her office, I'm just like, it's pretty emotional. So, this episode is a really good one. And I don't know what else to say other than this show is really, really good. I think we have 4 episodes left. I want to say there are 10 in this season. I'm not sure if I'm right or not. Either way, I'm excited to see where this is all going, because I know kind of what happened after the case too. I know after he was found not guilty, the Goldmans actually won a civil lawsuit against him, but not a criminal one. It's kind of weird how our judicial system works, but it somehow ended up that way. So they won a civil lawsuit and got some money because of it, and then afterwards he still ended up in jail anyway for something completely unrelated. So I do wonder if they're going to stop at the end of the case, or if they are going to carry it a little bit farther and have maybe a different moral for the show than if they just ended it with his case, him being found not guilty. That would kind of be 2 completely different morals. One would be, in the end, justice is still served. What goes around comes around, karma, whatever you want to talk about there. But if you end with him with the not guilty verdict, it's kind of like trying to say the judicial system can't be trusted. There are too many loopholes. We need to fix it. So it really does depend on what moral they want to bring out of this show. But I'm excited to see where they go with it. So let me know down in the comments below what you think. What do you want to see them end it on? What do you want to see next week? And what do you think is going to be the big, epic sort of climax for this show? Because normally when I'm thinking climax, I watch a lot of action shows, so I'm expecting a big gunfight or a big fist fight, something like that. This show is not going to have any of that, but either way, there is going to be some sort of climax. What do you think that's going to be? And let me know what you thought of this episode. Leave a like and subscribe for more American Crime Story and People vs. OJ reviews, and I'll see you at the next review. Peace out.